I just wanted to welcome everybody to Career Explore Northwest Live. My name is Tina Swanek, and I'm the Career Explore Northwest Educator Producer for KSPS PBS Public Television here in Spokane. Career Explore Northwest Live is an interactive Zoom event that connects young people with professionals to learn about careers and career paths. And today we're going to be learning about careers in cybersecurity. I'm going to go ahead and put our guest up on the screen here. Alex Chernikov is a computer security professional with over 15 years of combined software engineering and security engineering experience. He is a security engineer for Amazon, which I'm sure you all know, but it's an American multinational technology company engaged in e-commerce, cloud computing, online advertising, digital streaming, and also artificial intelligence. And Alex works for Amazon's Corporate Security Services, a federated security team focused on the security of finance, human resources, communications, legal systems, and company teams. And he previously worked for Avista Utilities and also Umpqua Bank as both a security and software engineer. Hello, Alex. Thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate you being here to share some information about your cybersecurity career and career path. And I'd also like to introduce real quickly our student guests today are from Cheney High School with CTE instructor Adam Smith. Adam, thank you for organizing this event for your school today and to your students for being here today. Before we get started, what I'd like to do is basically just kind of walk you through the agenda for the event. So we won't be taking any questions through chat today, just upfront wanted to let you know that. And we'll start with Alex telling us a little bit about his career as a security engineer and his career journey. And then we'll open the floor to questions from Cheney High School. So, okay, let's get started with our event. Again, welcome to Alex. Will you please tell us a little bit about your work as a security engineer and a little bit about your cybersecurity career journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tina. So as said before, yeah, I've worked in software engineering and security engineering. So I kind of out of high school, I started programming right away when I was at Eastern Washington University, working there as a web developer, kind of as a student job, essentially, just, something to get by. Moved on from there once I got my bachelor's, tried to go for a PhD, decided that was not worth it at all for computer science. Went for my master's as well, decided that was not worth it for computer science either. So ended up basically just getting a pen testing job at a local company here in Spokane called Intrinium. Now they're switched off to like a Torchlight for their security offerings. But I was there as a red team pen tester. And what that means is, red team versus blue team, where red team is more of like we're going to try to hack you and figure out your security vulnerabilities. Companies would go and hire us to, figure that stuff out. And then blue teaming is more of we're working at the company trying to stop the hackers. So my first job revolved around red teaming, doing audits for companies, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of fun stories from that. Then I moved on to, software engineering at Sterling Bank, which turned out to be Umpqua Bank through the merger, and moved on then from there to Avista. Like mentioned before, worked there as a security engineer and a software engineer. And Avista is the local utility company for Spokane and the region of Washington, Oregon, Idaho. And from there, I moved on to Amazon when COVID started. Luckily, I got like a work from home kind of opportunity. So I was able to still work in Spokane, regardless of, Amazon being located worldwide. They still have headquarters and stuff which they want employees to show up to, but I managed to get that exemption. So that was kind of nice through COVID. So that was a great opportunity there. Yeah, that's kind of my basic background. Security engineering in general is preventing or deals with the involvement of protecting company data. That's pretty much the basics of it. There's the triad of computer security, which involves confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality, where you try to keep the data secure, integrity, making sure that nobody changes that data, and availability, making sure that the data is available, nobody like takes down your website, that sort of stuff. Very basic background for that. And so there's a lot of different opportunities in cybersecurity, and the bigger the company that you go to, the more diverse the opportunities become. Because what you find out with smaller companies is you take on like larger, wider expanse roles versus like specialized roles in bigger companies. So that's another thing I wanted to mention there. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to, open up the forum for any questions from you guys specifically, because, this is a chance for you guys to ask questions for me, not for me to talk, basically. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Cheney High School, for our students who are asking questions, if you could just introduce yourself with your first name only before you ask your question, that would be really helpful. So Cheney, we'll have you go ahead with your first question.
Hi, my name is Cooper, and I'm wondering what sort of advancement opportunities exist for someone in cybersecurity, and how do you qualify for the roles in terms of certifications or tests you have to take? Yeah, so I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's an interesting question in and of itself. So advancement opportunities once you're in cybersecurity, it depends on the company, but there's usually, the bigger the company, again, the more advancement opportunities you have, from being like just a security engineer to going and advancing to like a senior security engineer, architect kind of level, versus like smaller companies. You are a security engineer, you might be more widely dispersed in your tasks and duties, but to promote yourself, you actually have to go like the management route to like, manager, director sort of thing, CISO type of position. So that's the kind of the advancements there. Like in terms of the company that I'm currently working at. Oh, by the way, I should mention, my views do not represent the views of my employer or past or previous. So I forgot to mention that as a kind of a caveat. That said, it's advancement for opportunity exists in bigger companies, and it's just basically how do you get to that? Well, being able to mentor others is a big factor of that. Like the more doesn't it really get you to a better position, like in promotion wise status. It's more of, how are you able to onboard new team members? How are you able to transfer your knowledge? How are you able to communicate with other business lines and like other, folks inside the business itself? And so communicating that and, being able to be effective with that is kind of like the promotion strategy. It's all about like, people skills basically. So that's good to know. And especially in security, yes, you can be more, introverted and, dealing with like technical problems. If you work with that very well, then that's great. That's kind of a good place to stay. But if you want to like advance yourself, you got to learn to like talk with people, make sure that you are able to communicate security issues, risks, strategies to other business lines and other people inside the business itself. Now, your other question was regarding how do you actually get into cybersecurity in terms of like what certifications you need, what education you need. Simple answer, you don't need anything. That's kind of, it's not common, but it is available. It's an available path. Like actually at my last job at Avista, we have a guy there that all he had was a high school degree, and he's right now like a senior architect there. One of the most knowledgeable people in information security that I've ever met. you know, he's able to do his job very proficiently. It's about more of the passion and, um, you know, you being able to learn on the fly. Learning is a huge thing in cybersecurity. New threats keep on popping up, new, you know, technology that you have to learn about. And so you being able to adapt on the fly and learn about that stuff is what makes it good for you. Like you have to be a self-starter yourself. That's like the role that you have to be in. Education wise, it's great if you get like a bachelor's in something like computer science or information security. It's great, like maybe getting yourself in the door with a couple of Security Plus certifications, like the CISSP, you know, that sort of stuff. Um, but ultimately, what's going to keep you in this job is your ability to learn and keep on learning and being able to like find inspiration in the job itself. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. Yeah.
Next question, Chini.
I'll go next. My name is Isaac. I was wondering, like, what do you think is the best way to like earn a job in cybersecurity?
To earn a job. So again, like I mentioned before, being able to kind of like, you know, learn on the fly, that's kind of a big thing. So coming from like a high school perspective, like maybe if you don't have any experience, best thing to kind of do is to start maybe kind of on a, there's two ways. So you could do like a security internship for any companies that offer that. And what that will help you do is, you know, they'll give you like basic tasks and everything to kind of help you, guide you, give you a mentor to guide you, to teach you on how like the business world works. Because what you might learn in school might not actually be applicable fully to how the business world works. And it's all about learning new systems, how, you know, passionate you are about learning about that sort of stuff. So that's one way is, you know, find a company that gives you security internships and go through that, put that on your resume, and, you know, you can advance with that based on recommendations and stuff. The other way is to start off in a field not related to security, kind of like what I did. Start off with a field closely related to cybersecurity. You can go into programming, anything in IT, system administration. You could start off working in a tech center and build up your knowledge, but still have that drive and passion for security, learning about how things work. Because, and there's a separate word for like, you know, the word hacker. It actually comes from, I know it has like a negative connotation, but it actually comes from somebody who knows a lot about a specific subject enough that they know like the inner workings of it. So that could be hardware related. You know, like you open up your iPhone or whatever, and like you're able to figure out how the pins and connectors work, and you're able to, you know, I'm not a hardware person, so that analogy probably won't work, but or, you know, you go in and figure out how web vulnerabilities work, and you know, you start off, I obviously don't hack live websites that you shouldn't be hacking, but yeah, just figuring out how things work from the get-go, like from that layer, and then building your knowledge on top of that to how does this apply for security? How can attacker get into the system? How can I prevent that? So yeah, it's kind of a roundabout way for a generalized question, but yeah, hopefully that kind of answers it.
My name is Kennedy. What new skills have you developed as a professional working in cybersecurity?
What new skills have I developed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so throughout my life, just developed skills related to, I would say, penetration testing from the get-go. So that first job was, so kind of giving a background on what happened there. So I came in basically to this interview to work at like an IT help desk for this company. And they had a position opening for a security engineer, like a penetration tester. So I said, well, can't I apply for that instead? They're like, sure, why not? The other person on them flaked out or whatever, that they hired like a week before. So, but my passion there was like, even before then was figuring out how computer systems work, how I could get into places that I shouldn't be in, sort of stuff. So yeah, before I was even like applying for a job, I kind of had that experience of, you know, how do I hex edit a file? Like, how do things work on the computer, and how can I break them? So that part of learning wasn't particularly on the job. I brought that experience with me to my first job, and then learned things like where I shouldn't be hacking, more of like how the business world works, how to see how to interact with various different CISOs and people who might not understand the technology as well as I do. Being able to bring the technological terms down to like, I don't want to say their level of understanding, because they've got a lot of things else on their mind. They might have like a business background or whatever. But they're reliant on you to help explain why security issues are a thing and why they should get them fixed and why they're important. So being able to relate that to various different people is a good skill set that I learned on the job that I might not have necessarily gained from a technical background that I had before.
My name is Holland, and what are basic skills should a student working on to prepare for a career in cybersecurity?
What basic skills? And it depends, honestly. Yeah, in cybersecurity, yeah, you're going to have to sit in front of a computer all day. That is kind of a thing. You're going to have to take meetings with people. So it's a very white collar job. It's not like, yeah, go out and work in the field sort of thing. Some of the skills that you would need, it's good to have a good background of security fundamentals and strategies for how to secure systems. Like, for example, being able to read a network diagram and figure out, okay, here's the kind of like the architecture of the system. Let's say, like being able to look at like a threat model or a diagram. And what that is basically, a set of systems. Like you could have a bunch of servers that you're trying to secure, servers, being computers that have all your, data that you're trying to secure and everything. And being able to figure out a strategy to say like, this is how you secure that data in defense and depth. And what that means is what kind of layers or strategies can I apply to all these systems to make sure that they are secure. And going into that, I know it's like an overview, a lot of words used out there, but getting into more of the details, like how do we prevent like bad guys from getting into our network and causing damage if they do get into our network? So obviously you start from the internet connection layer and like, do we place down a firewall? How do we configure it? Okay, so making sure that we block off ports and stuff. So those kind of skill sets of learning about technologies to do that for you. What's out there? Is it something that is open source that we can use, or do we have to spend some money to get something better? What technologies are out there? How do they work together? And then once we like put that layer on, okay, so what else do we have to do to prevent attackers from getting in? If they got in somehow through that area, what else can they go to? Being able to manage how to close off systems and defense in depth is kind of like, in Shrek, where he's like, yeah, I'm like an onion, I have layers. Security is like an onion, it has layers. So, what file permissions do I need to set to make sure that only, certain people have access to this file, sort of thing. So it's a lot about learning about different specific technologies, and it's vast, it's wide. There's security principles that kind of govern, the whole ecosystem, but to get into technical details on everything, you just have to learn it. Because one vendor might do, and by vendor I mean like, hardware vendor, whatever, that sells like a firewall. One vendor might do something one way, another might do something another. Learning the specifics of how one does what you're trying to achieve.
My name's Eli, and do you have a mentor? If so, how have they helped you in your career?
Mentor. Right now, I don't really have a mentor per se. I do talk with some other, like we do have higher up security engineers, principal engineers and stuff like that. So we do get advice from them for projects that we do. At my level currently, it's more of a, you figure out your projects, you present your projects, and you go out and figure out how to get those projects accomplished, sort of thing. At my previous jobs, I did have what I would call mentors, and they have helped out in basically figuring out, like when you start a new job, especially like what I mentioned is you don't know anything. Like you go into this new place, you just have like, your security fundamentals kind of in your backpack. Like, okay, you shouldn't be, giving out admin permissions to everybody. You shouldn't be doing this or this or this. You should have systems secured in this way. And then you come into this new business and all that's thrown out the window because they need to do like this for their business or this or this. So having somebody to go to and say, how is this done here? Why is this done this way here? And that's what the mentor is providing you, basically, and saying, this is how it works here because the CEO wanted this to work out this way. And it was a business decision. It might not be a very good security decision, but it's a business decision. And helping you, that mentor helping you figure out that pathway, basically is, what they're there for. As well as, any technical questions you have, they'll kind of help you out with that too. But that's essentially it right there. Otherwise, if you're not like kind of like a self-starter in this field, you're not going to get very far because the mentor is not going to do your job for you. They can definitely point you in the right direction. But they have their work to do too. So it's not like they're, actively hired to be a teacher.
All right.
Yep.
Can you tell me about some of the most frequent or difficult challenges you have? And sorry, my name is Connor, by the way.
Yeah. Frequent or difficult challenges. All right, this one's a fun one. Because in security, what ends up happening is you find security risks in your organization. Let's say it could be anything, like you find a website vulnerability, you find somebody's not doing something correctly, like they're sharing a file across the entire network that has passwords in it and it's not password protected itself. Or like, some of the low hanging fruit like that, or it could be, pretty extensive security, like, okay, it's a cross-site scripting attack. If you don't know what that is, I mean, you can Google that. I don't want to go into too much technical detail on this one. But, and taking that and trying to explain to the person who is involved, it may be a programmer or a program manager, somebody who can take care of that problem, and having to explain, hey, this is why it's bad. This is why you should fix it, and getting it on their timeline so that they can fix it quickly and within your timeline as security, because you're trying to stop bad guys from getting in. But then there's this vulnerability out here, and vulnerability is you know, way that somebody can get into a system essentially. It's a and so having to explain why it's important as well, and what the consequences are of it if it's not patched or whatever. And so one of the stories I had for that was one time I found like a, you know, exploit that could be done by just scraping a website. And scraping, what that involves is taking like an automated script and just pointing it at a website and saying, okay, download, you know, the information. Normally, if you do it manually, you have to go and click buttons and get information that way. For example, like if a website asks you, okay, input your phone number and I'll give you back details for your account or whatever. So you have to go and type in each phone number by hand. So you have like a scraper that does this for you and can do thousands of requests a second and just get all that data. And if the website doesn't stop you, you can download data for like your entire customer base, basically. So having to go and explain that to a project manager to get it fixed. And when the project manager says, no, we're not going to fix this, it's not important. Yeah, so that essentially is what happened. Where, you know, like I found this vulnerability, I said, hey, this needs to be fixed. They kind of ignored it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to build a script to go and download all this stuff. Take that, send it to my director of security, loop in HR and stuff like that, because this was like a whole huge dump of data, essentially. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's a problem. We could get fined millions of dollars for this. This needs to be fixed. And it got fixed within like 30 minutes after that. Like, so having to navigate, you know, people is, you know, a difficult challenge all the time, because everybody has their own priorities, everybody has their own deadlines, and US security are coming in there and saying this needs to be done before everything else. Point being is, yeah, it's hard to navigate people, essentially, is a challenging thing, and having them being able to understand the risks involved. So
Hard to be diplomatic yet forceful.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of political games you have to play, and a lot of times you have to involve managers to help do that for you. So if you're not a people person, you know, you got managerial backup for that reason.
Okay, next question.
Hi, I'm Joy, and my question is, what types of decisions do you make in cybersecurity, and also how much free reign do you get over those decisions? Like, I'm guessing each company has their own type of protocol, but how much free reign do you get over making all those decisions?
Absolutely, and it also depends on what position you're at. So, and it depends on money. Money is always a factor in your decisions. So, well, hold on, what was the first part of the question again? If you could repeat it.
Like, what types of decisions do you make in cybersecurity?
Okay, yeah. Decision-wise, we work a lot based off of policy. So what ends up happening is there's usually a document that's written up for each company that includes a cybersecurity policy. This is how you treat your data. This is what you have to do to it. You have to like encrypt it. If it's this type of data, you have classifications of data and stuff like that. So like, you know, credit card numbers might be treated like holy grail secure versus like somebody's name might be like, okay, if it gets passed around, whatever. Might be a bad example, but so you as a security engineer usually work based off of that cybersecurity policy. Depending on the company, you can end up changing that policy based on new information, evolving strategies, that sort of stuff. You as a cybersecurity engineer, there's a lot of decisions that you make is more of recommendations, depending on your position, if you're working on security systems versus pen testing and stuff like that. But what ends up happening is you usually take new recommendations like, oh, this file share needs to be locked down. Okay, so you write up a document saying, here's the action you need to take. Here's why you should take it. Here's where it says in the security policy why it should be applied. But ultimately, you aren't the one who's implementing that change. It has to be coming from whoever owns the file share. And if it's a business decision that they say, no, we aren't doing it, there's usually an exemption process for that. That exemption process usually involves, depending on how high the risk is. And so you get to decide how high the risk is based off of like CVSS scores or, that sort of thing. There's like a standard scoring system that security engineers use on a scale of 0 to 10 on how bad a vulnerability is, for example. And so based off of that, you can determine, okay, if it's like a high or critical, the CIO needs to sign off on this. If it's something less, okay, a manager needs to sign off on this if you don't want to do it, or you can fix it and not have anybody sign off on it. So the higher the criticality risk, the less likely that the person is going to say, no, I don't want to do it, because they have to have like the CISO sign off. Unless like there are circumstances where an exemption like requires the business to keep running. Like, hey, we know that this is bad. We know that this is might be horrible, but we need this to keep running our business. So we're gonna have the CISO sign off on that. And that's like the chief information security officer. So that's pretty much your decision-based process is more of writing a document, helping define those recommendations. Unless it's like, yeah, we need this fixed now and you have the authority to do so, but that's usually in a run book somewhere or in a policy somewhere.
My name's Elsa, and I was wondering what like your biggest surprise has been in cybersecurity and what surprised you the most about your field.
Biggest surprise in cybersecurity. Nothing surprises me anymore. Well, yeah, make sure everything is documented that you're doing. Let's see. I think that would be one of the biggest ones. Earlier in my career, kind of the biggest surprises were, just how easily, it's how many low-hanging fruit things there are in a business. How many people don't actually care enough about cybersecurity, that they might develop code insecurely without maybe even knowing about it. They're just, doing this one thing and they don't think about, oh, I implement this function in this way. Could a hacker get into it? Or, oh, I'm storing passwords in a plain text file on a file share. I can access them. Other people can access them. Well, it's all an internal network, right? Like, why would somebody want to open up this file? It's on the honor basis, sort of thing. Or, just very low hanging fruit. And like you're coming from like the cybersecurity background where you're looking at like maybe like the latest XZ exploit that happened, where you got like state actors potentially like programming like backdoors into systems and packages to exploit the entire ecosystem of servers and do it sneakily. But then you're coming into a business and being like, oh, they're just like putting their passwords on a sticky note in front of their computer. That's the kind of stuff that you have to deal with. That was kind of surprising. It's like, how do people like do this? So yeah, I think that would be it for me, is all the low-hanging fruit that really is in cybersecurity that you're trying to stop, is the people aspect of it, not so much the technical. It's like, I don't get computers. Why are you making me do this? like, sort of thing. Why are you imposing all these policies on me? Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, my name is Logan. Do you have any professional experiences unrelated to cybersecurity that helps you in your current position now?
Unrelated to cybersecurity. Again, what I mentioned before, I did have like a software engineering background, and I think having that other field or another specialization outside of security engineering, or just, seeing things from a different perspective. Yeah, you can like get all the security principles in your backpack, like I said before, but then come into the business and they're like, we work this way, we work with these technologies, and you're just sitting there like, I don't understand any of this. I don't get why this system works this way, or how like it authenticates to this server, or so having like that other experience, like in my case, it's programmatic, helps in that I can connect with the other folks who are in those business lines. So programmers, for example, who might not code securely, just, create something, a function or whatever, a program. And I can come in and be like, okay, let me take a look at your code and actually understand it and say, okay, in this line right here, you want to actually be doing this instead of this, and being able to get on their level, being able to talk and say, it builds like the trust relationship of, oh, it's not just a security engineer telling me, oh, it's, has cross-site scripting vulnerabilities and I have to go figure it out myself. It's being able to go and explain it to them, being able to work with them about that. And so that builds that trust relationship. They're more eager to come to you in the future with, hey, here's my code. Do you see anything wrong? How can I make this better? Like, so that's from the programmatic perspective, but you can apply that to any perspective, system administration, DevOps, any sort of like, if you work with like user end hardware, like, laptops or desktops or stuff like that, just being able to like identify with others that like you understand what they're going through, you understand what effort it is on their part to fix something, and yeah, being able to relate to them.
Great, thank you so much, Alex. Before we sort of wrap up here, is there anything else that you feel the students should know about careers in cybersecurity that we haven't already covered today?
Yeah, be curious. As kind of the thing with cybersecurity is, there's a lot of great videos online for just a wide variety of things, and you're not limited to, okay, I have to work with, firewalls if I want to be a security engineer. You can do pen testing, you can do application security, you can do auditing. I don't know why you would do auditing, but you can do auditing if you want. There's a wide range. Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what you want to do, how you want to do it, what you're interested in, and how you want to specialize essentially. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. You did a fantastic job presenting today. And you mentioned when we were talking earlier before we started this event, it's a very technical field. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to, express some of the technical requirements so that someone who maybe doesn't have your background understands what you're talking about. And that's part of the skills that you recommended that people have to kind of learn as part of the job. So great job kind of sharing it in layman's terms, the information in layman's terms with us today. And also walking through some of the business considerations related to positions in cybersecurity. I think that's very important for students to know. So I want to thank you for being here today, for taking time out of your schedule to do so. I also want to thank the students of Cheney High School for being here today. We appreciate all of your thoughtful questions, and you taking the time out of your classroom, Adam Smith, for to let your students participate in today's event. And we hope that you all found this session very informative, interesting, and especially that it helped you to get the information you need to determine if a career in cybersecurity might be the right career for you. So that concludes our Career Explorer Northwest live event.